Hey, Barbs and Bozos, it's Wednesday, February 23rd. That was a struggle. And we're going to get into stories. Let's see, head to the side so you guys can see that. And to there, and to here. We got through, let's see, mine was Minerva. Oh, stupid brain. Athena, Thinker, March, Aries. The two definitions of March.
And the walking.
And
Warlock.
War walk, but going off to fight. And then
Third
why
month.
does the month connect to Aries?
Astrology.
The thoughts are matching each other.
The weather's chaotic.
Chaotic weather.
Yeah.
Good job not yelling out March Madness as I had kids do yesterday. Thinking that 3,000 years ago they were naming the month after basketball, but kids are pretty special. Alright, into our stories for today. On Blue Sheet, my goal is we should get this whole section done by the end of today's story. Fingers crossed on how things go. Maybe not number 11, but we should hopefully get through 10 if things go well. I'm not stopping and answering each question because that would make for a really boring story. What I plan on doing is just telling story, and if you pay attention, you'll get them. As in, you probably already know number 1, what thing existed first. See, the first two gods. So stuff like that you guys already know and you can write down as I go through and do the stories. I'm going to read you the other questions just so that way when you hear them in the story, you'll know that they're coming. It'll say, who are the first children of Gaia and Uranus, the second and the third. Then for the little draw, the stick figure things, I basically just want to make sure you know the size differences between man, Titan, Olympian, Cyclopsian, 50-headed monsteran, and so just the different sizes and roughly what they look like. What were the Cyclops better at doing? Where did Uranus put the children he did not like? Where did the Titans live while they ruled? Who were the Titans? How many were there? Who did they marry? Why did Gaia want Uranus overthrown? Who overthrows Uranus? And the weapon that is used. And then if we're lucky, we'll get to 11. Actually, we should get to 11 if you pay attention. What was Kronos' greatest fear once he becomes leader of the gods? So fingers crossed, we'll get through all of that. All right. Did we start the story with you guys at all yesterday?
No, we did was talk about chaos.
Well, then let's keep going from there. So the first thing to exist in Greek mythology, chaos. We got to what chaos looks like?
Nothing.
Oh yeah.
The chocolate. There you go. Because it's hard to imagine nothing, so I figure imagining a chocolate pudding is a little bit easier on you. And then eventually the chocolate pudding gets bored and splits to form the very first two gods. Like a giant amoeba, it splits to form the dos amibos. And those first two gods it splits to form?
Uranus.
So Gaia and Uranus, or Gaia and Uranus. Gaia or Gaia, also known as Mother Earth. Uranus, known as? There you go. They believed that it was the actual earth and sky. The thing that you stand on was a god that you could communicate with. The sky was not human-shaped, neither was the earth, although the earth was flat, which we're going to get to today. It is not a giant ball, it was a giant dinner plate. And then the sky was a thing that floated on top of it. They were actual gods you could communicate with in Greek mythology.
So we could communicate with the ground.
You could. Now, the gods could. Humans can't, only because we can't understand the language. It's sort of like a foreign language, and you had to have a translator who were special humans who were trained to do it. Kira?
No, because we're mud.
And, well, later on, yes, we also have some mud issues going for us. So, years go by, and it's just Mother Earth and Father Sky hanging out doing Earth and Sky things. They're the only things that existed for thousands of years. Till one day, Mother Earth goes and approaches Father Sky. And she goes, "Hon?" And he goes, "Yeah." She goes, so you know how you keep calling me Mother Earth? And he goes, "Yeah, well, it's your name." She goes, "Yeah. And you're Father Sky." And he goes, "Yeah, that's my name." She goes, "I don't think we can keep using those names." She goes, "Why?" She goes, "Well, I can't be a mother and you can't be a father if we don't have children." And he goes, "That's a good point." She goes, "I know." He goes, "What are children?" She goes, "I have no idea." He goes, "Well, we should go invent some." And she goes, "Yes, we should." So they decide to invent the first children. And And he goes, I've heard there's a class you can take at school that tells you how those come to be. Have you taken that class? And she goes, no. He goes, neither have I, because that'd be awkward. So how about we just stare at each other, wiggle our fingers, and scream babies? And she goes, well, that'll make the story much less creepy. So they go, all right, let's have our first set of babies. So they stare at each other, and they just go, babies! And it works. And the first set of children are born to Mother Earth and Father Sky. There's 3 of them that come shooting up out of the earth. They are going to be the first children ever born. They are also the largest beings to ever exist aside from Mother Earth herself. They were thought to be larger than mountains themselves. And they have a long name called the Hecatoncheires. And it's a long name. I'm not going to call them Hecatoncheires because that's not a name I expect you to remember. We're going to call them by their other name, the 100-handed monsters, because they had 100 hands and 50 heads. In Greek, this actually means 100-handed. Hecaton means 100, Shire means handed, and their name actually meant 100-handed. The monsters was because when you looked at them, they were horrible and frightening. Luckily, I was able to do some research, and I tracked down photographs of them from this time period to help you guys out, and hopefully you don't judge them quite as harshly. And so these were pictures of them from that time period, the 3 different ones. They had individual names. You don't need to know them, but I have kids who ask. It was Cultus, Gyges, and Briareus were the 3 of them. And so these are the 3 monsters that come shooting up out of Mother Earth. Mother Earth takes one look at them, and she's like, oh my God, they are adorable. And she Gucci-goos them. When you go on their little chin, you go, Gucci, Gucci, goo. And she Gucci-goos all their heads, but it takes like an hour and a half because there's 150 heads. And she's like, I'm sewing. And she has no hands, which really slows her down. Father Sky takes one look at them, and he's like, hey, look at me. That one kind of and throws up all over Mother Earth. And she's like, did you just vomit on me? And he was like, look at those things. And so Father Sky does not approve of the ugly babies. He's like, listen, we have to get rid of those things because every time I look at them, my stomach goes, and comes out of my body. So let's just throw them away. And Mother Earth goes, no, you don't throw away ugly babies. He's like, well, what do you want me to do? She goes, well, how about you turn around and face the other way? He goes, you want me just to face? She goes, done! And he's like, and so now he is forced to just turn around and not look at Mother Earth or the babies. Mother Earth is happy. She has babies. The babies are happy. They exist. Father Sky, not so happy because he can't turn around and look at his 3 sons. And they were all boys. And the problem is when you have 3 boys living in the house, they spend most of their time roughhousing. It's what boys do. And when you have gigantic immortal brothers and they spend their time jumping off of mountains, they invented this thing called the atomic elbow, which is when you jump off the top of a mountain and you take your elbow and then your other hand and you rub the bottom of it and then you hit the person in the head as you come off the top of the mountain, and they love doing the atomic elbow to each other. They're like, atomic elbow! Rah! But the problem is whenever you would miss your brother, you would hit the ground and a big earthquake would go wooga 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 and shake everything and make noise, which would startle Father Sky. And he'd be like, hey, what was the roll? And he would throw up again. Father Sky got tired of throwing up every time his children made sound. So Father Sky decides he is going to solve this problem. He goes, children, come here. And the children come running. They're like, yes, Papa. I'm sorry. They went, because they spoke monsterese. And he goes, I want to show you something. And he reaches out his giant sky hand and rips a giant hole in Mother Earth and creates a pit called Tartarus, Tartarus. Over here behind Airclay, I have a poster because Tartarus is going to play a big role throughout Greek mythology. This is a pit thing over here. And he has this giant pit. And he goes, children, look in the pit. And they go, blaga, blaga. And he takes his other hand and goes, boink, 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 and pushes all 3 children into the pit, making them disappear forever until later in the story. And so he gets rid of all 3 children, smacks the earth back on top of it, goes patty, 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 and goes, we're never going to talk about that mistake again. Years go by. One day, Mother Earth comes to talk to Father Sky, and she goes, hey, hon. And he goes, uh-huh. She goes, remember those things called children? And he's like, whoa. Uh-huh. She goes, well, I think the first ones we had are called practice babies. And so what we need to have are real babies. And he goes, well, what's the difference? He goes like, well, everyone knows the second one is better than the first one because the first child is just a practice child. So then you're going to get the real baby, which is the second one coming through.
The third one is the best.
And so he goes like, well, I don't want ugly babies. And they're like, no, only the first one's the ugly baby. So we're not going to have to worry about that. He's like, all right, but if this baby's ugly, we're getting rid of it. She's like, okay, you can throw away the ugly babies. He's like, oh, have you taken that class yet? And she's like, no. He was like, wiggle fingers? And she goes, wiggle fingers. And they go, okay. And they just go, babies! And it works again. And now a new set of babies are born. Father Sky covers his eyes. He's like, I can't look at them in case they're uggos. And Mother Earth is like, they're so adorable. And 3 more of them come birthing up out of the earth. Doink, doink, doink. Again, 3 males, but these are much smaller than the big ugly monsters. Where the monsters were big enough that they were bigger than mountains, these come up to like the big ugly monsters, like middle of their shin or something like that. They're way smaller than the same. And Father Sky goes, describe them to me. She goes, well, they're much smaller. He goes, keep going. She goes, well, 2 legs. He goes, good. She goes, 2 arms. He goes, oh, that's a start. She goes, they each have 1 head. He's like, oh, I like where this is going. And she goes, they have 1 mouth, 1 nose, and it looks like 1 giant eyeball in the middle of their forehead.
Oh, yeah.
He was like, well, that's kind of creepy, but not necessarily ugly. And this second set of children are called
Cyclops.
And this is where the Cyclops come in. And the 3 Cyclops brothers are born. Mother Earth is excited again because she has babies. Father Sky is excited because he doesn't throw up when he looks at them. And again, through research and hard work, I have found photographs of the Cyclops for you. And these are the 3 Cyclops. They exist at the time. They also had names, Arges, Brontes, and Steropes. And those were the 3. Again, you don't have to know the names. It just saves kids from asking me. And the 3 Cyclops are born. And Father Sky is happy this time. He's like, oh, no more vomiting every time I see my children. Like my childhood. And so because of that, he lets them stick around. And everything goes well. Until the Cyclops discover that they have a special ability that no other god has except for them. And this special ability is, one of the brothers realizes he can take his hand, plunge it into Mother Earth, grab raw metal, rip the metal back out of Mother Earth, and he's strong enough he can shape the metal into different things with his bare hands. And he immediately starts to shape this metal into a sharp, pointy stick because he's a boy. And he's immortal, and he has 2 brothers. So what's he going to do with sharp, pointy stick?
Brothers
Yeah.
people.
Well, apparently you guys have
Shish
brothers,
kebab.
which is exactly what he does. He's like, look, Bob, it's a pointy stab, stab, stab. And the other one's like, oh, that hurt. Let me make one. Stab. And they start stabbing each other. Father Sky finds this hilarious. And he's like, it's a stab-a-thon. And they all start running around stabbing each other, and they start making shields, and Father Sky's clapping. He's like, get them. And things go wonderfully. Till this one time, one of the Cyclops has the bright idea where you take your sword, that's the classic trick on a brother, where you run up to the top of a mountain, jump off the top of the mountain with the sword above your head, and then you cut your brother in half so the 2 halves fall apart and you can just laugh at 2 halves of your brother. Classic thing. So he goes running up to the top of the mountain, and he's like, I'm going to get you! And he jumps off the top of the mountain, and he swings to chop his brother in half. But when he does, he hits the thing above him and cuts that instead. The thing above him being Father Sky. And see, it's all fun and games until you stab your father. And apparently stabbing your dad takes all the fun out of things. Because Father Sky's like, yeah, did you just stab me? They're like, no, it was Bobby. And they blame Father Sky is having none of this. He goes, listen, no more daddy stabbing. You guys have had this conversation in your house too. No more daddy stabbing. If you stab daddy again, I'm going to put you in the hole. Right? Word for word, same conversation at your house. And so because of that, the kid's like, don't put us in, I don't even know what a hole is. He goes, listen, no more stabbing. They go, okay, we won't stab you again. And years go by, and they don't stab their dad. Till one day, one of the brothers realizes that instead of having a pointy stick, you go stabby, stabby, you can make the pointy stick longer and then you can throw it at your brother while they're running away from you. And if you do it just right, it pins them to the wall. And then when they're pinned to the wall, you can just run up and stab them, and it's all kinds of great fun. So they start making spears and chasing each other and just winging spears at each other, which is great. Till the one time you're chasing your brother and you have your spear, and then you wing it at your brother to try and stab him and pin him to the wall, but he sees it coming and he does the old dodgeroo, ha-cha, and he goes flying right past and he starts laughing at you, and then you realize the spear's still going, wooga, 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 and you throw so hard because you're a god that just keeps going up into the air, and then eventually it hits
The sky.
who's just sitting there watching TV as Father Sky does. He's like, what's on TV? Is that a spear? Mickey's like, it was Bobby. And so again, Father Sky's like, that's it. I told you no stabbing Daddy. So he decides to solve this problem. So he reaches out his giant god hand, rips open the giant hole in the earth. The giant hole is called
The pit.
Tartarus, or the pit. It's like my house. It opens up the giant pit, takes a giant chunk of metal, throws it into the pit and goes, look, kids, metal. And they go, where? He goes, dunk, dunk, dunk. Pushes all three of them into the pit and makes them disappear where they are never seen again until later in the story. So I did not do that. It was Uranus. I love ugly stabby babies. And so Father Sky goes, that's it. No more ugly babies. No more stabby babies. We're done. And Mother Earth was like, okay. And it's just the two of them for years. Till one day,
The third child is the best.
Mother Earth comes back to Father Sky. She's like, hey, I was talking to some friends. He's like, who? She's like, shh. And they were using this phrase that says, third time's a charm. So I believe we should have a third set of babies because everyone knows the third one is the best one.
Yes.
And he's like, you said that about the second one. And she was like, well, obviously that was a mistake. And he's like, listen, I'm done after this. I don't want any more ugly babies, and I don't want any more stabby babies. So if these come out ugly or stabby, I get rid of them. And she's like, oh, I got you. No more uglies or stabbies. And he's like, okay. He's like, have you taken that class? She's like, no. He's like, wiggle fingers? And she goes, wiggle fingers. They go, okay. Babies! And they have the third set of babies. This time, Mother Earth tries something a little different. Instead of 3 babies, instead of 6 babies,
Oh my god.
instead of 9 babies, she has an even dozen of them. It's like a box of donuts. And she's like, babies everywhere! And babies just come shooting up out of the ground. And these babies are even smaller than the other ones. Compared to the Cyclops, they come up to like the little Cyclops' ankle bone. Compared to the big ugly monsters, they're like the size of their little baby toes. So they're way smaller. And she tried this new thing that she created. It's a boy with a brain. She calls it a girl. And she decides to make half of them girls and half of them boys. And so this new set of Titan babies are called, and this is where the Titans come in. And this time Father Sky is super excited by them. He's like, they're adorable, they're tiny. He's like, I don't throw up at them. Oh, hang on. And he goes and grabs a chunk of metal. And he throws this giant chunk of metal down the middle of him. He goes, do something with that. And the Titans go. He's like, yay, they can't hurt me. He's like, these are perfect babies. He's like, they're not going to make me throw up or stab me. We're keeping these. And the Titans go, what do you mean you're keeping us? He's like, shh, don't worry about it. So now, they also have names. Again, you don't have to worry about most of them, except for the 2 in red. Cronus and Rhea are going to keep popping up in our stories. The other ones, they show up. I looked them up just so, again, kids would know, but I'm not going to make you know all those different names. So, now we have the third set of babies, the Titans. And they're running around on Earth, and now Mother Earth is happy. She has babies she gets to keep. Father Sky is happy. He's not throwing up. The Titans are happy because they get to exist. And they get so happy, eventually, they decide that they want to create a place to hang out together, a giant clubhouse. And they're going to make a clubhouse someplace where they are still in contact with Mother Earth so they can talk to her, but they want to make it close to the sky so they can talk to their father. So where are they going to build it to make it close to the sky but still on Earth?
No, mountain.
A mountain. So they build a clubhouse on top of a mountain. And they call this clubhouse,
Mount Olympus.
and this is where Mount Olympus comes in. And each of the Olympians, or each of the Titans, decides that they want to have their own chair to sit in whenever they go talk to their parents. They each get to design their own chair, and it has its own look and feel to it. So how many chairs are in Mount Olympus?
12.
Which is why we only ever have 12 Olympians, going back to this very first set of Titans and the fact there were 12 of them. Which is why over there you only have 12 Olympians, because you can only have 12 thrones up there. And again, down here in the pit of Tartarus, we still have the Cyclops and we still have the big ugly monsters. They're still existing.
Yay.
So now we're back to here. And things go well. The Titans are having a good time. Gods are having a good time. Till one day, Mother Earth calls all of the Titans up to Mount Olympus. And she goes, we need to have a talk. And the Titans come up and they go, what's going on, Mom? This sounds serious. And she goes, well, I was talking to some friends. And they go, what? They said, shh. And they told me about this phrase, and I think I need your help. And they go, what is it? She goes, the phrase is called, I want to make sure I get it right, it's grandbabies. I think I need to have grandbabies. And they go, done! Where can we buy them? She goes, well, apparently you can't buy grandbabies. You're going to have to make grandbabies.
Oh my God.
And the 6 male Titans go, anything for you, Mom. We love you. We're going to get you some grandbabies. She goes, good. You're going to have to get married. And the 6 male Titans go, done. Let's go find some wives. And the 6 male Titans go off looking for wives. And they search near and far and then realize, well, there's only 6 people to choose from. And so who do those 6 male Titans choose?
Your sisters.
So each one pairs up with their phrase you should never have to say, favorite sister, and they start populating the earth with little Titan grandbabies. And we end up getting Titan grandbabies, and the Titan grandbabies meet other Titan grandbabies and make these things called Titan great-grandbabies, and then we get Titan great-great-grand, and we end up getting thousands of grandbabies all over the earth, spreading everywhere. And things are going wonderfully. The Titans now rule. Uranus is the king of all the gods. Mother Earth is the queen of all the gods, and everyone should be happy except for Mother Earth. Something is still bringing her sadness. She has babies. She has grandbabies and great-grandbabies. But what still brings her sadness? The fact that the ugly babies and stabby babies are gone. And Mother Earth is pro-uggo baby. And she does not feel that just because a baby's ugly, you throw it away. Or just because a child likes to stab you, you throw it away. So she decides that she wants to have those babies back. But what's stopping her from getting her babies back? Uranus, her husband. So if your husband is preventing you from getting your babies back, how do you solve that? I like how you guys think. So she decides to invent this thing called murder. She's an inventor. So it's going to be tough because her husband's a god, but she's a woman, and women don't give up. So she also has to hire this thing called an assassin because she can't do the killing herself because she has no arms. And it's really hard to kill somebody without any arms. You just throw yourself at them. So she decides that she is going to hire somebody. So she starts talking to the 6 original male Titans, and she calls each one of them up one at a time, beginning with Oceanus, who is considered like the oldest of them, which is weird because they're like all the same age. But I don't know how you can have an older or younger and twins, because that wouldn't even make sense. So anyway, you have the fact that she calls up Oceanus, and she's like, hey, Oceanus, huh? He's like, yes, Mom, what's going on? She's like, I've got a couple questions for you. He's like, yeah. She goes, so what are your thoughts on becoming king of all the gods? And he's like, oh, man, that'd be great. I'd love to be king. Wait, isn't Dad king of all the gods? She goes, yeah, he is. Okay, just roll with me on this. What are your thoughts on killing your dad? He's like, why? I don't want to kill Dad. I love Dad. And she's like, oh, like you're sure? He's like, yeah. She's like, oh, okay. JK, oh, that was a joke. I just invented these things called jokes, and they're hilarious. Send in your brother. I want to tell him a joke. And so he goes out and then sends in the next brother. And the next brother comes in. She goes to the same thing. She's like, hey, how would you like to kill your father? And the each one's like, no, I don't want to. And she goes through 5 brothers till she gets to the last brother, who is considered the youngest of them, a guy by the name of Cronus. And Cronus comes in. And she goes, hey, Cronus. He's like, hey, Mom, what's up? She goes, how would you like to be king of all the gods? He's like, I would love it. The other gods make fun of me, saying like I'm the youngest one. We're all born at the same time. I think they're just a bunch of bullies. She goes, well, how would you like to be king of the gods? He's like, I would love it, but isn't Dad king of all the gods? She goes, yeah, you have to kill him. Cronus goes, okay. And she goes, what now? He goes, yeah, I'll kill him. Why, like right now? Like, are we busy? Or she's like, whoa, settle down, Tiger. She's like, this is great. I'm glad that you're on top of it. And he's like, yeah. He's like, how do we go about doing this thing? She goes, well, I'm going to make for you a special weapon called a scythe, S-C-Y-T-H-E. And you're going to use this weapon to kill and attack your father, which won't be easy because he's a god, but we're going to stick with it. And again, the scythe is the thing that's up there in Kronos' hands. You can see in that picture.
Wait, is it a scythe or a scythe?
You can also see it in my hand here.
Oh.
This is also a scythe. So, and you can pronounce it either way. So, scythe. Woo. And so she makes for him a scythe out of a special metal called adamantium. And adamantium was supposed to be the hardest substance to ever exist. It was supposed to be strong enough that it could even pierce the skin of gods. Very rare and powerful. Those of you who follow comic books, there is a comic book character named Wolverine who has like these little claws that go schnickety-schnickety. In the comic books, his skeleton and claws are made out of adamantium, which is supposed to be the strongest thing to exist, which is a reference back to Greek mythology. So, Mother Earth tells him, all right, you're going to use the scythe, and you're just going to go stabby-stabby into your father. And if you stab him enough times, you're going to chase him to the edge of the earth, because I'm flat, like a giant dinner plate. And if you chase him to the edge, we're going to kill him and get rid of him. And Cronus is like, great, when do we do it? She goes, well, every day he comes down to give me a hug. So I say this next time when he comes down to give me a hug, you jump up and begin Operation Stab Your Daddy. And he's like, oh, what a weird name for it, but I can do that. So what time of day is it that the sky comes down to give a hug?
Oh, sunset.
It's sunset. So he goes and hides behind the mountain and waits for Father Sky to come down. That night, Father Sky comes down and is like, come here, hon, let me give you smoochies. And as soon as he comes down for the hug, Cronus jumps up from behind the mountain. He's like, hey, Dad, how are you doing? And Uranus is like, I'm okay. Is there something behind your back? And he's like, just a sharp, pointy stick. And Uranus is like, okay, well, that was creepy. So I'm just gonna like run away now. And Cronus is like, and starts chasing after him. Uranus runs and Cronus chases him, jumping off the top of mountains. If you've ever played like the old Super Mario Brothers, where you go jump, you go badoing, same thing, except badoing, imagine you're stabbing your father. And so he chases after him, jumping off the top of mountains and going choppity and chopping into Father Sky. And every time he chops into Father Sky, a chunk of Father Sky comes flying off and hitting Mother Earth. Every time these chunks hit the Earth, a new creature is created that's going to show up in our later stories that we're going to get to tomorrow. But we're going to have to stop with our story for there, with our dad still alive. No father killing until tomorrow.